The candlelight caught the gold rim of my champagne flute as I lifted it to my lips. Around the long mahogany table, 40 guests laughed and chatted beneath the crystal chandelier I'd personally selected 15 years ago when we built this house. The Christmas tree in the corner stood 12 feet tall, its ornaments reflecting the warm glow of the fire crackling in the stone fireplace. Everything was perfect. Everything was mine. And then Claire placed the card in front of me. I watched her manicured hand slide the white place card across the linen tablecloth, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. The word was printed in elegant script, housekeeper. The conversations around me continued, but I felt the shift. Several guests glanced down at the card, then quickly away. My son Ethan stood at the head of the table, carving the prime rib I'd ordered from the butcher shop where I'd been a customer for 20 years. He looked at the card, looked at his wife, and smiled. Not a warm smile. A smirk. Claire leaned down, her blonde hair falling over her shoulder in that practiced way she'd perfected. Her voice carried just far enough for the nearby guests to hear. "The food is for family, Margaret. I'm sure you understand." She straightened, placing her hand on Ethan's shoulder with the ease of ownership. Several people shifted in their seats. My business partner, Tom's wife, Sandra, stared at her plate. Daniel Harper, my attorney, set down his fork with deliberate care. I looked at the card again, then at my son, who had finally stopped carving and was watching me with something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Contempt. I smiled. Not the tight smile of someone wounded. A genuine smile. Then I reached for the card, turned it face down, and pulled my chair closer to the table. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and clear, "I think I'll stay." Claire's face flickered with something close to panic, but Ethan touched her arm and she recovered, settling into her own chair with a practiced laugh. "Of course," she said. "I was only joking, Margaret. You're so sensitive." The table relaxed. Conversations resumed. Wine flowed. But I saw what I needed to see in that moment. I saw who my son had become. I saw what my daughter-in-law believed. And I understood, with perfect clarity, what I needed to do. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd surrendered my power when I stepped back from the daily operations of Reynolds Logistics 5 years ago. When I'd handed my son the title of CEO and told him I trusted him to carry forward what I'd built. They were wrong on all counts. I made it through dinner, made it through dessert, made it through Claire's toast to family and tradition, where she somehow managed to mention Ethan's leadership 6 times without once acknowledging that I'd founded the company 28 years ago in our garage with $5,000 and a used delivery van. When the guests finally left, when the catering staff had cleared the dishes and departed, I found myself alone in the kitchen I'd designed. Ethan and Claire had retreated to the master suite upstairs. The master suite in the house I owned. I pulled out my phone and sent a single text to Daniel Harper. "Need to meet. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. His response came 30 seconds later. "My office. I'll clear my morning." I poured myself a glass of the good scotch, the Macallan 25 that Ethan thought he'd been clever hiding in the back of the liquor cabinet, and I let myself remember. I remembered being 27 years old, pregnant with Ethan, negotiating with the bank for that first loan. The loan officer had asked if my husband would be joining us. I'd told him my husband was dead, killed in a car accident 3 months earlier. I'd told him the business plan was mine, the concept was mine, the drive was mine. I'd gotten the loan. I remembered the first year, working 16-hour days, picking up and delivering packages myself when drivers called in sick. I remembered balancing Ethan on my hip while I cold-called potential clients. I remembered the first time we turned a profit and how I'd put every penny back into expansion. I remembered when Ethan turned 18 and I brought him into the business. How his eyes had lit up when I showed him the operation, the fleet of trucks, the warehouse, the office building we'd purchased downtown. How he'd asked if he could work there, learn the business, be part of what I'd built. I remembered saying yes, remembered meaning it. And I remembered when he brought Claire home 4 years ago. 24 years old, fresh from her MBA program, beautiful and charming, and so very interested in our family business. She'd asked such intelligent questions. She'd praised my accomplishments. She'd called me inspiring. I'd believed her. I finished the scotch and went upstairs to the guest room where I'd been sleeping for the past 6 months. Not because Ethan and Claire had asked me to move out of the master suite. They hadn't needed to ask. Claire had simply begun redecorating, and I'd taken the hint. The next morning, I arrived at Daniel's office at 8:45. He was already there, coffee brewing, files spread across his desk. "Tell me," he said. So I did. I told him about the card, about the pattern of small humiliations that had been building for months, about the conversation I'd overheard last week, where Ethan and Claire had discussed asking me to sign over the house to them for tax purposes, about how they'd stopped including me in company decisions, about how my title had quietly changed from founder to founder emeritus to, most recently, nothing at all on the company website. Daniel listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "What do you want?" he asked. "I want to know what I actually own," I said. "And I want to know what they think they own," he smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "That," he said, "I can definitely help you with." The next 3 weeks were a masterclass in discretion. Daniel worked with Linda Moore, the company's CFO and one of my first hires, to quietly audit everything. The house, the business, the investment accounts, the trust I'd established for Ethan. Every asset, every document, every piece of paper with my name or the Reynolds name on it. During those 3 weeks, I played my part perfectly. I was quiet, accommodating. When Claire asked me to move the rest of my things out of the master closet, I did. When Ethan mentioned that they were thinking about renovating the kitchen, I smiled and said how exciting that would be. When Claire's mother visited and I was introduced as Ethan's mother, no elaboration. I shook her hand warmly. I became invisible, and while I was invisible, Daniel and Linda built me a fortress. The day Linda called me to her office, I knew we'd found something. "They tried," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Last month, Ethan came to me with paperwork that would have transferred the house into a joint trust with him and Claire as primary beneficiaries. Did he now? He said you'd agreed to it. He had what looked like your signature." My hands went cold. "Looked like. I know your signature, Maggie. I've seen it 10,000 times. That wasn't it. It was good, but it wasn't yours. What did you do?" "I told him I needed to verify some tax implications and I'd get back to him. Then I called Daniel." "And what did Daniel find?" Linda's smile was sharp. "That you never signed anything. That the house is entirely in your name, as is 65% of Reynolds Logistics. That the trust you established for Ethan has specific conditions attached to it, conditions that require him to be acting in good faith as an officer of the company. And that Claire Reynolds has no ownership stake in anything except the Mercedes you bought them as a wedding present." I sat with that for a moment. They don't know this. They think the business is 50-50. They think the house is jointly owned because they've been living in it. They think the trust is unconditional. Because I never corrected them. "Because you trusted them," Linda said quietly, "and they took advantage of that trust." I looked at her. This woman who'd been with me since the beginning, who'd worked nights and weekends to help build something from nothing. "What else?" She slid another folder across the desk. This one was thinner. "This is harder," she said. "I didn't want to bring it to you, but Daniel said you'd want to know everything." I opened it. Inside were photos. Claire and a man I recognized as Marcus Webb, one of our logistics partners. They were kissing outside a hotel in White Plains. There were timestamps, 3 different dates over the past 2 months. "Does Ethan know?" I asked. "We think so," Linda said. "Marcus mentioned something to one of his employees about a business arrangement with the Reynolds family. The implication was that Ethan was willing to overlook certain things in exchange for Marcus funneling more contracts our way." I closed the folder. My hands were steady. My voice was steady. Everything about me was steady because I'd had practice, 30 years of practice, staying calm when I wanted to scream. Set up a meeting, I said. Family meeting, here at the office. Tell Ethan it's about estate planning. Tell him I've agreed to formalize the transfer of assets he's been requesting. Linda's eyes gleamed. When? Friday, 10 a.m. And Linda? Have security ready. The days until Friday passed with strange slowness. Claire was friendlier than she'd been in months, probably anticipating what she thought was coming. Ethan actually hugged me on Thursday evening, told me he was proud of how I was handling things, how gracefully I was accepting the natural transition of power. I'd smiled and told him I'd always wanted what was best for him. Friday morning I arrived at the office at 9. Daniel was already in the conference room with Linda. We reviewed everything one last time. Then we waited. Ethan and Claire arrived at 9:55. They were both dressed well, Ethan in the navy suit I'd bought him for his birthday, Claire in a cream dress that probably cost more than my first delivery van. They were holding hands. "Mom," Ethan said, kissing my cheek, "this is good. This is the right thing." "Sit down," I said. They sat. Daniel remained standing near the door. Linda sat across from me, her laptop open. "Before we begin," I said, "I want to tell you both a story." Claire glanced at Ethan. He gave her a small nod, the kind of nod that said humour her, we'll have what we came for soon enough. "When I started this company," I said, "I was 6 months pregnant and widowed. I had $5,000 in savings and a degree in business administration from a state school. The bank officer who gave me my first loan told me I'd be bankrupt within a year. Do you know what I told him?" Ethan shifted in his seat. "Mum, we know the origin story. I told him," I continued, my voice cutting through his interruption like a knife through silk, "that I would build something that would outlast both of us. And I did. 28 years, Ethan. Reynolds Logistics has been operating for 28 years. We have 347 employees. We have contracts with 17 Fortune 500 companies. We have assets worth $43 million. Which is why we're here," Claire said smoothly. "To make sure all of that continues into the next generation." I smiled at her. "Exactly. Which is why I had Linda prepare a full audit of company assets and ownership structure. Daniel, would you distribute the folders?" Daniel moved around the table, placing identical folders in front of Ethan and Claire. They opened them simultaneously. I watched Ethan's face as he scanned the first page, watched the colour drain from his cheeks, watched his eyes dart to Claire, then back to the document, then to me. "This says," he began, his voice uncertain, "this says you own 65% of the company." "Correct. But you told me it was 50-50. You said when you retired." "I stepped back from operations," I said. "I never retired. And I never told you the company was 50-50. You assumed that. I never corrected the assumption because I trusted you to earn your share through your work, through your leadership, through proving you could handle the responsibility." Claire was flipping through pages now, her manicured nails clicking against the paper. "The house," she said. "The house is listed as solely owned by Margaret Reynolds." "Yes. But we've been living there. We've been—" She stopped herself. "You've been living in my house," I said calmly, "as my guests." Ethan stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is insane. You can't just—" "We had an agreement." "We had an understanding," I corrected. "An understanding that you would respect what I'd built. An understanding that you would value my contribution. An understanding that you would treat me with basic human decency. I have treated you." "You let your wife call me the housekeeper," I said, and my voice finally held an edge. "In front of 40 guests. In the house I built. At the table I bought. You carved the roast I ordered, and you smiled while she humiliated me." Claire stood now too. "It was a joke, Margaret. You're being incredibly sensitive." "Sit down," I said. Something in my tone made them both freeze. I'd used that voice before years ago, when negotiating contracts, when firing employees who'd stolen from me, when facing down competitors who thought a widowed mother would be easy prey. They sat. "Linda," I said, "show them page 7. Linda reached over and flipped to the page in their folders. I watched them read, watched Claire's face go white, watched Ethan's hands start to shake. "These photos," Ethan said quietly. "Where did you get these?" "Does it matter?" I asked. "Are they real?" He looked at Claire. She was staring at the table, her jaw tight. "We can explain," she started. "I don't want an explanation," I said. "I want you to understand your situation. You, Claire, have no legal stake in anything connected to the Reynolds name. Not the house, not the company, not even the car you drive, which is registered in my name. You are my son's wife, and that is your only connection to this family's assets." Her eyes flashed with anger, but she stayed silent. "You, Ethan," I continued, turning to my son, "have a trust fund that was supposed to vest when you turn 35. That's next year. The trust is worth $7 million. However, there are conditions on that trust." I slid another paper across the table. "The trust requires that you be acting in good faith as an officer of Reynolds Logistics. It requires that you maintain the company's reputation and ethical standards. It requires that you treat the company's founder, that's me, with respect and dignity." "Mom, last month you attempted to forge my signature on documents that would have transferred the house into your name. That violates the good faith clause. You've been aware of your wife's extramarital affair and have attempted to leverage it for business advantage. That violates the ethical standards clause. And you publicly allowed me to be humiliated in my own home. That violates the respect clause." I let that sit for a moment. The conference room was absolutely silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. "The trust," I said quietly, "is void." Ethan's face crumpled. "You can't do this." "I can. I am. Daniel has already filed the paperwork. I'm your son." "Yes," I said, and I let him hear the sadness in my voice. "You are. And I loved you enough to build you an empire. I loved you enough to trust you with my life's work. I loved you enough to step aside and let you lead. And you loved me so little that you let your wife call me the housekeeper." Claire stood again, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. You're a bitter old woman who can't accept that you're not relevant anymore. You think you can bully us with lawyers and paperwork, but we'll fight this. We'll take you to court. You'll what?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "You'll expose that you're having an affair with a business partner. You'll explain to a judge why you tried to forge my signature. You'll argue that you deserve assets you never earned from a woman you've spent the last year systematically disrespecting." She opened her mouth, closed it, sat down. I stood, gathering my papers. "Here's what's going to happen. Ethan, you will remain CEO of Reynolds Logistics, but you will report to a board of directors that includes me, Linda, and 3 outside members I've already selected. Your salary will remain the same, but your profit sharing will be contingent on company performance and your behaviour. You will live in the house on Maple Street until the end of the month. After that, you'll need to find your own accommodations." "Where are you going?" he asked, and he sounded like a child, lost and small. "I've purchased a house in Santa Barbara," I said. "Ocean view, 3 bedrooms. I'll be moving there in 2 weeks. I'll be establishing a foundation in my name, focused on supporting widowed mothers starting their own businesses. I'll be living the life I should have been living all along." "Mum, please," Ethan said, and there were tears in his eyes. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize I was still a person," I said. "You didn't realize I still had power. You didn't realize that silence isn't the same as weakness." I picked up my bag. "Maybe now you will." I walked to the door. Daniel opened it for me. "Margaret," Claire said behind me, her voice tight with rage. "You'll regret this." I turned back, looked at her. This beautiful, ambitious, cruel young woman who'd thought she could erase me from my own story. "No," I said, "I really won't." I walked out of the conference room, through the office I'd built, past the employees who'd helped me build it. Some of them looked up and I saw recognition in their eyes. They'd heard, probably. In an office of 347 people, word travelled fast. Linda caught up with me at the elevator. "That was magnificent," she said. "That was necessary," I corrected. "Where to now?" "Home," I said. "To pack." The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. "Linda," I said as the doors began to close. "Thank you for remembering my signature." She smiled. "I remember everything about you, Maggie. Some of us never forgot who built this place." The doors closed, the elevator descended, and I felt, for the first time in months, like I could breathe. The house in Santa Barbara was everything the listing had promised. White walls, oak floors, windows that framed the Pacific Ocean like living paintings. I closed on it a week after the meeting, moved in 10 days later. Ethan helped me pack, silent and subdued, while Claire stayed in their temporary apartment across town. He tried to apologize again, standing in the foyer of the house he'd lost, surrounded by boxes of my things. "I don't know what I was thinking," he said. "I don't know how I became this person." "You became the person you chose to become," I said. "And now you have to decide who you want to be next." "Can we fix this?" he asked. "Can I fix this?" I looked at my son, this man I'd raised and loved and trusted. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But that's not my job anymore. My job was to raise you. I did that. Now you have to raise yourself." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "The company will be there if you prove yourself worthy of it," I said. "The trust could potentially be reinstated if you demonstrate real change over time. But I'm done sacrificing my dignity for your comfort. I'm done being invisible in my own life." "I understand," he said. "I hope you do," I said. "I really hope you do." I left for California the next morning. The movers had already taken my furniture, my clothes, my books, everything that mattered. The house on Maple Street stood empty behind me, ready for whatever came next. I didn't look back as I drove away. The foundation launched 3 months later. Reynolds Rising, I called it. We gave grants to widowed mothers starting businesses, provided mentorship, connected them with resources. In the first year, we helped 47 women. In the second year, 93. Ethan sends me emails sometimes, updates about the company, apologies, requests to visit. I respond to the business updates and ignore the rest. Maybe someday I'll be ready to rebuild something with him. Maybe not. But that's a choice I get to make now, and I'm in no hurry. Claire filed for divorce after 6 months, took her share of whatever Ethan had managed to accumulate, and disappeared to New York. I heard she married Marcus Webb a year later. I didn't send a gift. I sit on my porch now, watching the sun set over the Pacific, and I think about that Christmas dinner, about that place card with the word housekeeper printed in elegant script, about the moment I realized my son had forgotten who I was. But I hadn't forgotten who I was. And when it mattered, when everything hung in the balance, I remembered that I'd built something from nothing once before. That I'd survived loss and doubt and every voice that told me I couldn't do it. That I'd been strong enough to create an empire, which meant I was strong enough to reclaim my dignity. They called me the housekeeper because they'd forgotten who built the house. But justice, when you plan for it carefully, when you document everything and keep your allies close and wait for exactly the right moment, always finds its way home. I take a sip of wine, expensive wine that I bought with money I earned, in a house I own, in a life I built from the ashes of what I'd lost. And I smile, because some of us were never the help. We were always the architects. We just needed to remind the world of that simple truth.